The desert wind carries more than dust. It carries memory and warning. For millennia, a tapestry of words has been woven not by human ambition, but by the breath of the Almighty. These words have lain silent in scrolls, etched into the conscience of a scattered people, waiting for their appointed time. But what if that time is now? What if ancient prophets, cloaked in the mists of history, foresaw headlines you scrolled past this morning? Tonight, we open the pages not as relics of the past, but as blueprints for the present, unlocking codes that link the Israel of yesterday to the Israel of today, and perhaps the Israel of the world to come.
Before we start, I need your help. Subscribe to this channel so we can keep bringing these hidden truths to light.
It begins with a puzzle scattered verses, seemingly unconnected. Isaiah's promise of a nation born in a day. Ezekiel's vision of dry bones rising to life. Amos foretelling the rebuilding of ruined cities. At first glance, these are fragments beautiful, yes, but incomplete. Yet, when aligned, they form a single unbroken line, pointing toward a return, a rebirth, a restoration. Israel's re-establishment in 1948 was not a political accident. It was the fulfillment of a centuries-old timetable written in the ink of eternity. The prophets spoke of fields once desolate, now yielding fruit, of exiles returning from the four corners of the earth. And now, these fields are green, and these plains bring sons and daughters home. Coincidence or code? Prophecy is rarely linear. It weaves back and forth, folding time like parchment in the hands of its author. Micah speaks of a remnant small, yet fierce returning to its land. Jeremiah speaks of a covenant renewed, not replaced. Moses warns of exile for disobedience, but also whispers of mercy when the heart turns home. Ik strand, when isolated, feels distant from the others, but in the full light of history, they converge into a single tapestry, one in which the return of the Jewish people is not only foretold, but necessary for the next chapter in God's plan. The question is not whether these events were predicted. The question is whether we are willing to accept what comes next in the sequence. For prophecy is not merely about the past, it is a door into the future. Consider the language of Isaiah 66:8. Shall a nation be born in a day? For centuries, it seemed impossible. Nations rise and fall over lifetimes, not hours. Yet on May 14, 1948, the impossible happened. A declaration was made, and before the sun set, the world witnessed a prophecy cross from parchment into reality. From that day forward, the land itself began to change. Forests planted, cities rebuilt, ancient Hebrew spoken again in the streets, a language revived from the grave. But the rebirth of Israel was not only about territory, it was about alignment, setting the stage for events long foretold, but not yet fulfilled. And if the first part has come to pass with such precision, what of the rest? The birth of Israel in 1948 was more than a national milestone, it was the unsealing of an ancient promise. From the ashes of the Holocaust, from the scattering of centuries, a people stepped back onto a stage prepared long before their exile. The prophets had spoken of such a moment, of a time when the barren woman would sing, when the ruins would be rebuilt, when the watchman would cry once more from the hills of Jerusalem. To many, it was political victory, to others, a geopolitical miracle. But to those with eyes trained on the scriptures, it was the first trumpet in a sequence that could not be stopped. The question whispered through prayer and fear alike: if the first promise has been kept, what of the ones that follow? 19 years later, the pattern deepened. The Six-Day War, brief yet seismic, altered not just maps, but prophecy itself. Jerusalem, the city of kings and prophets, returned under Israeli control for the first time in nearly 2 millennia. The Psalms had sung of her walls, the prophets had wept for her streets, and Zechariah had promised her deliverance. In 1967, the world watched as those words stepped out of shadow into daylight. It was as though the heartbeat of prophecy quickened as though the clock that began ticking in 1948 had just struck its next mark. The center of the ancient world was now back in the hands of the people it was promised to, and that center would become the focal point of everything yet to come. The return of the land was only the beginning. What followed was alignment nations shifting, alliances forming, tensions simmering exactly where the prophets said they would. Demographic patterns mirrored ancient warnings. Populations returning from exile, communities flourishing in once desolate areas, agricultural abundance springing from dry soil. Even Israel's adversaries played their roles, echoing the nations named in Ezekiel's visions, a coalition foretold, now assembling in plain sight. And yet, the movements are subtle, cloaked in the language of diplomacy and economics. To most, it is politics. To those who study the patterns, it is prophecy in motion. Each move on the geopolitical board brings the narrative closer to a climax foreseen long before any modern leader took office. To read prophecy without the Messianic lens is to see only half the picture. The Messiah is not an afterthought in Israel's story. He is the axis on which it turns. Isaiah 11 speaks of a branch from the root of Jesse, bringing justice to the nations and peace to the land. Through this lens, Israel's rebirth is not simply about survival, but preparation, a stage being set for the arrival of the promised king. Every shift in borders, every gathering of exiles, every surge of global attention on Jerusalem becomes part of a larger choreography. The question grows louder. If the stage is ready, how near is the main act? When we speak of redemption, we often confine it to the realm of the heart, a spiritual rescue from sin. But in the Hebrew prophets, redemption is also national, physical, and territorial. It is the liberation of a people and the restoration of a land under divine covenant. Ezekiel 37 does not speak only of personal revival, but of an entire nation rising from graves, flesh on bone, spirit in lungs. Through this view, Israel's modern history is not random survival. It is the enactment of a promise that spans heaven and earth. The redemption foretold is both personal and geopolitical, a union of the spiritual and the tangible in ways the modern mind resists. Thousands of years have passed since God spoke to Abraham under the desert sky, promising descendants, land, and blessing to all nations through him. Empires have risen and crumbled, armies have marched, exiles have wept in foreign lands, yet the covenant still holds. Even in dispersion, the Jewish people have carried this invisible contract, sealed by the one who cannot lie. In today's international negotiations, the echoes of that covenant still stir the air, though politicians frame it in legal terms. Its roots are divine. And if that ancient promise has survived exile, persecution, and attempted erasure, then nothing in the present can undo what is destined to come. Look at the headlines. They are not just news. They are footnotes to an ancient manuscript. Every technological breakthrough in Israel, every diplomatic accord, every military escalation seems to echo a verse written long before satellites and smartphones existed. Isaiah spoke of a time when the desert would bloom. Today, Israel's agriculture exports feed nations. Zechariah described all nations gathering against Jerusalem. Today, global debates over the city's status dominate international summits. It feels less like history unfolding, and more like a script being read line by line. Those who study prophecy often speak of birth pains events that increase in frequency and intensity before a greater arrival. In recent years, the pace has quickened. Regional conflicts igniting with little warning, global powers shifting their gaze toward the Middle East, religious tensions flaring at sacred sites. It is as though the clock, once slow and deliberate, now ticks in rapid succession. For those tuned to the prophetic frequency, this is not chaos, it is alignment. And alignment means the next phase may be closer than anyone dares to imagine. The modern state of Israel is not merely a participant in global affairs. It is the axis on which many global narratives now turn. Energy pipelines, trade routes, Cyberdefense, and religious pilgrimage all converge in this small strip of land, making it the most influential piece on the geopolitical chessboard. Yet the prophets saw this long before cartographers drew its borders. They spoke of Zion as the mountain to which nations would stream, willingly or by compulsion. From UN resolutions to secret backroom negotiations, Israel remains the unavoidable subject of world attention. This was not chance, it was foreseen, and it is moving toward a moment where the focus will be absolute. We now stand where prophecy and reality blur, where what was once distant is now visible on the horizon. The convergence of signs is not accidental. Wars and rumors of wars, the stirring of nations, the moral upheaval of societies. Ancient texts warned of these conditions as the prelude to a greater unveiling, a day when the Messiah himself would step into the course of human history once more. For Israel, this is not simply about survival, but about stepping into a role written before the first stone of the temple was laid. The stage is not being built, it is complete. The next act only awaits its appointed time. To understand Israel's prophetic destiny is to understand the trajectory of the entire world. Every nation, willingly or not, will find itself positioned in relation to this land and its promises. Those who bless will be blessed. Those who curse will face the weight of divine reckoning, a principle as old as Genesis. This is not mere religious poetry, but a geopolitical reality already in motion. The choice is no longer whether prophecy will be fulfilled, it is whether we will recognize our place within it before it is too late. The ancient codes have been read, the patterns, undeniable, the prophecies, alive. We are no longer looking back at history, but forward into its final chapters. If these words have stood for thousands of years, surviving exile, war, and the rise and fall of empires, what force could possibly prevent their completion? The question is not about the fate of Israel that is already sealed. The question is about us. When the last line is spoken and the final seal is broken, where will you stand?